Society version 2012, Subversive Strategy for Supplanting the Growth Imperative. So we've got a problem. A few for that matter. Global climate change, catastrophic oil spills, nuclear disasters, mountaintop removal and deforestation, and irresponsible fuel extraction, which in turn destroys our precious water systems, including the privatization of precious resources, the genetic modification of our food supply, and the industrialization of it. We have economic crises, housing crises, rampant unemployment, and it's not limited to the United States, with free trade and war permeating the world over. I know, that's heavy. It's because things are heavy. Take a breath. Okay. We're going to do three things. First, we're going to identify the problem. Next, we're going to identify a vision. And lastly, identify the strategy. Step 1, the problem. Let's get Socratic. The question is, what do all of these things have in common? Here's your hint. Yeah, that's right, money. And more specifically, here's your hint. Humans, persons. Humans, persons. Here a little shout out to Plato. What gives these persons such great influence and control? Here's your hint. Yeah, that's right, power. And more specifically, while you're thinking, here are some clues as to what kind of power it's not. It's not flower power, it's not black power, it's not femme power, and it's certainly not our power. Here's your hint. Yeah, centralized power. Centralized power. Centralized power. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is that centralized power at massive scales we're seeing today produces an imbalance of power, and therefore an imbalance in control over resources, as well as an imbalance in the decision-making abilities of the peoples. Well, what do we do about it then? I'm just one girl, you're just one person. Well, to answer that question, I must ask, are you ready to rumble? So let's just say we have a box, and sometimes well-accepted systems find themselves contained in these boxes, such as knowledge, academia, law, history. And those are in quotations because remember, all of these institutions are produced. They're manufactured. Here, they're manufactured by these people. By these people. And therefore, they have a monopoly on the box. The function of which is to secure the big nasty P word. No, it's not power this time. It's profit. And this isn't limited to the US borders. It permeates through Latin America and every other country around the world. As a matter of fact, the Central Intelligence Agency, since the early 1950s, has been engaged in assuring hospitable business relationships across the globe. So how is this behavior identified throughout history? Here's your hint. Right, imperialism. Imperialism. Okay, well, I hear you saying, well, that's just your opinion. You don't believe me, right? Well, take it from the empire itself. So, though empire may not look as though the Roman Empire existed ages ago, this can be empire too. This can be empire too. So the problem is an imbalance of power. So what's the vision? There's three elements to the vision. Resiliency. We can't depend on our oppressor to be our liberator. We can't expect our gatekeeper to provide us with the key. So we have to build ourselves, our homes, our communities strong and be resilient and self-sufficient. This is just a few examples from one farm in Vermont. Sustainability. It's more than simply replacing one form of consumerism for green consumerism. Sustainability is actually reducing, sourcing locally, and reusing as a last resort. It's being creative with what we have, not creating more and more and more. There are examples all over the nation and all over the world with transition towns and creative ways of reusing items. And autonomy. You can't force people to follow directions that they find arbitrary. Often when you speak of autonomy in autonomous regions, this is what comes to mind. But it should be noted that this is autonomy as well. The function of these three elements, resiliency, sustainability, and autonomy, is that it disempowers and strips centralized authority of the empire. It robs them of their unwavering monopoly over resources and power. What this does is it disrupts the imperial project from the foundation up in a subversive, productive, and nonviolent manner. So our vision encompasses resiliency, sustainability, and autonomy. So what's our strategy? Well, generally, states have centralized control and they begin to lose legitimacy, at which point a population dissents. Either the state succeeds, usually over a monopoly of violence, or the population succeeds. And as we've seen, often that population will then reassert that same state behavior. So what would be a logical step to take to establish a more resilient and balanced relationship of power? Well, if our problem is the centralization of power, then we can just go ahead and move this little d over here and decentralize those power sources. Well, how? I understand that that's a really difficult question because psychologically we've been conditioned to believe that we're subordinate to power. There's a relationships of dominance and subordination. And as inferiors, those that have been conditioned to believe that they're inferior, we behave in ways that perpetuate that relationship. And so we have to move away from these relationships of dominance and subordination and replace utilizing these tools that have been manufactured with, drumroll, ourselves. Ourselves! But humans are vile and nasty and selfish creatures who just want to tear the throats of their neighbor. That's a state of human nature, right? I mean, according to Hobbes. But is Hobbes relevant to this? Is he relevant to this? Are his theories relevant to this? According to Hobbes, the condition of man is a war of everyone against everyone. He believes people are solitary, poor, brutish, and nasty. That life is short. If we trust in ourselves and reclaim our power, we move from being subordinate to being empowered. We move from being caught under a monopoly to flourishing in diversity. We move from a growth imperative to degrowth, where we truly live within our means and encourage others to do the same. Because imperialism as a system assures its survival by maintaining control over that which it subordinates. So to depend on this imperial power to advocate for individual and community resiliency and autonomy is paradoxical. And unless that empire is met by a bigger force, it will never willingly relinquish complete control. So the sum of all of this is that we subvert imperialism by living within our means, engaging in practices of sustainability, diversifying and strengthening our communities, decreasing our dependence on imperial force, and in effect, rendering it obsolete in a subversive, productive, and nonviolent manner. So our subversive strategy is to decentralize, diversify, and degrow. So what's in the future? Will the empire strike back? Well, to review, we have an imbalance of power. We have to move from a centralized to a decentralized form of power. Our vision is through resiliency, sustainability, and autonomy. And we do this through decentralization, diversification, and degrowth, which non-violently disrupts imperial project from the foundation up. So the hope is that the decline of empire will look less like this and more like this. So I ask you, what better place than here? And what better time than now?